All right, good morning, ladies. So today we're going to tap into the topic of reaction, of how we react to certain situations. What is that first reaction, and then like where it comes from, why it's there, and then how do we kind of enter problem solving, but more like self-soothing and emotional regulation from that space. But as always, we're going to begin with a little bit of breath work, right? So wherever you are, just find a comfortable seat. You can kind of just begin by rolling your shoulders back. Just notice your chest area if you are kind of slumping forward and the chest and the ribs don't have enough space. So even if you're kind of collapsing into your midsection, just notice if you can kind of build a little bit of an elongated spine. So almost visualizing that if you had like a fishing hook connected to the back of your head and somebody just lifted with a string the spine a little bit. Notice what happens if you have a little bit more space in your midsection. And we'll begin to breathe. We'll begin to add some oxygen here. So placing the tongue at the roof of the mouth. And you could start to breathe. If you yawn, it's just release. Inhaling through the nose. Really filling into that space internally. Filling that space within. And then softly beginning to exhale. And release. Again, softening the jawline. Noticing the eyebrows. Noticing even the eyes in itself. Gentle on the inhale. And then softly begin to exhale. Notice what comes up. Notice the process. Inhale again through the nose. And just pay attention, more of like an observation. Fill that space internally. Notice if you have space even. Hold that space. And then softly begin to exhale. Inhale one more time. And then softly exhale. All right. When you're ready, you can come back into the space. Feel free to stay exactly where you are if that is a sense of contentment for yourself. So we'll begin with the concept also of happiness. If you're in a space where you are truly happy, you're not seeking happiness. So just noticing if you're in a place where you're like, I'm not happy, I'm looking to be happy, I'm not happy enough, and you're kind of working on your happiness, it's a sign that you aren't actually happy. So when we're trying to figure out, are we in a place where we are content versus a place of a lack of a contentment, the fact that you're searching, the search in itself is already a sign that you're not in a happy place. So that is just something to pay attention to. And again, we're going to build on this there. So don't freak out. um, when you think of contentment, contentment comes from a sense of simplicity. Happiness is being able to appreciate the simple things. For a lot of people, when we're looking for that joy and contentment in our life, we think that it's just like with if money can buy you something, we think that we assume, and society has shown us or tried to convince us that the way we can reach happiness is through success. So, like the currency, I would say, for contentment or happiness is success. And that's not always true. In success itself, and we're going to bring up another point, that again, where success has its place, but in the place of happiness, it doesn't really. And I've seen this in my own life, and I've seen this in, I'm saying in general, and this is something Naval says, and he says that like you have to kind of notice when you're like in success itself, there's usually ego, and what we're trying to do is feed a different part of us, right? A part when we're thinking of success, a lot of times is like, oh, I became successful, or people didn't believe in me, and now that I am successful, you see, whatever that is, right? You're trying to prove yourself something. You're trying to prove somebody else something. You have to define what success means to you. Now, for a lot of people, especially nowadays, with all the, like, you could say algorithms, and this is when it comes to business or just in general in life, the algorithm of even like dressing a certain way or eating a certain diet or running your business a certain way. So like even in business, they'll say you have to run it this way. You have to be sharing this amount of content. You must be spending this amount on ads, whatever the formula is. And then a lot of times we'll start doing that formula, and it doesn't connect. It doesn't actually give us the fulfillment. We might have a success talking point where we're like, but I did everything, like saying a diet, but I did everything I should. I did everything everyone said I should, because if the goal, let's say with a diet, is to lose a certain amount of weight or to feel healthy, if you're not getting what you wanted out of it, then it's not that the formula was wrong. There was a sense of disconnect. So when we think of the concept of happiness doesn't necessarily come from a place of success, but a place of really connecting internally to yourself and being able to kind of process your own algorithm. What is your own personal algorithm? What is your own value? How does your body respond? How does your lifestyle respond to it, right? So like, even in our world as like practicing Jews, right? The goal is, let's say, less technology in our lives, right? As in, when we think about what takes up our space on a day-to-day basis, the goal is to try to have less technology. And the question is like, if you have a business, if you have family to contact, everything is about email and everything else. How do you handle that, right? And the thing is, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. When we ask ourselves, how do we integrate our own lifestyle and accommodate ourselves in the demands of the world at large, right? So really, when we think of like an external success, there is a little bit, it's ego driven. There is some ego there where we believe, right? Because the belief system there is, if I subscribe to whatever that belief system is, if it's that this is going to make me money, if this is going to give me health, if this is going to make me feel loved, if we subscribe to that, right? Then, and we're not taking ourselves into account, where, as in, this is not actually supportive, then we have to step back and say, okay, what am I doing, right? Because it's not going to get us the happiness, right? So if we break down happiness, happiness in itself is a sense of contentment, right? There's this simplicity to it. It's literally boring. It's the thing you look at and are like, really? That's what it is? Yes, it's that simple. It's available for everyone. And it's something you can get with one breath by just disconnecting yourself from all, or removing yourself from the larger kind of population, and just coming into your own body and reconnecting, dropping the shoulders and really just taking an inhale and being present within yourself. And it's available right then and there. So just paying attention to that. So when you kind of look at success, as in, success can almost be like a detour, because you're not going to get to the happiness through that. Success has its own thing. So just paying attention to that when it comes to happiness. Okay. So where we're going to go next with that is noticing how we react. So for a lot of us in life, we're always trying to solve the success problem, which would be like, I'm trying to get somewhere and I'm not able to get there. And these are the things that are standing in my way. One of my children had something really powerful happen. He's very, very smart. And we were talking about the concept of being taken care of and being nurtured. He's the type of person that will take care of everybody. And I reminded him when he came home from yeshiva, the last time he came home, I said, I'm just reminding you that when you come home, allow me to take care of you. Allow yourself to be nurtured by me. Your job is not to take care of me. My job is just to nurture you, and just let me nurture you the way I can. And that was like really challenging for him, but he's my son. And there was a lot of, work that we've been doing on that subject. And he's been, reading some of the stuff, and then we've had a lot of conversations around it. And he came home, and he was home. And I got a phone call from him a couple days ago that he said to me when he's back in yeshiva in a newsman, and he's like, Ma, I'm in a place where my learning is just exploded. I'm able to learn really well. I have chavrusa, like I was able to kind of level up my chavrusas to whatever, like not better ones, but kind of more, he can go into depth. His information retention is a lot stronger, and he sounds a lot more content. And I said to him, he goes, I think I know why. I said, you don't know why. I'm going to tell you why. And it was really simple. He opened up and let himself be nurtured uninterruptedly, meaning it wasn't about how he wanted somebody else to nurture him. It was about just letting things be exactly what they are. So it's not about him letting go. So there's two components to this. People think, I just need to let go and let the other person love me. That's not what we're talking about. That's passive. It's not active. So that's the misconception. A lot of times we think, I need to let go. But under the layers of letting go, there's still a sense of resistance. Because we're like consciously, I can't do anything about this, so I'm going to try to disconnect, right? That's literally what letting go is. But if we go into the active component of not letting go, but being receptive and allowing ourselves to be nurtured, as in not interrupting the other person from giving us what we need, right? Not the way we think we need it, but the way they are able to give it to us. What ends up happening is it's this active energy of being receptive. So when we're open, there's no resistance. So the letting go, there is resistance there because there's this undertone of I can't control this. But what we're talking about is this active component of allowing, this active component of receiving. And that was the shift in my son, in his actual success, in the sense of his contentment. When he's working with his contentment, his ability to be able to process information, but even because what happened was he turned on the receptors. Now, when we think about an ecosystem is a give and take. There's the input and then there's the output, right? And it has to evolve. And sometimes we have to step back and allow ourselves to see what we're giving can return, how it returns. So coming back to simple thing like a diet, you could follow something, but if it's not giving you what you need, right? And people will keep swearing by certain things. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. It doesn't matter how much somebody else swears by it. So, because everything has to be receptive. Now, the thing is, for a lot of us, we struggle with that space of like, first of all, trusting ourselves, trusting our process. We're so busy chasing success that we rather sabotage our own internal system for what somebody else is dangling on a fishing rod, on a fishing hook. Because that's what everyone's saying is working. And that is what everybody's saying is gonna get you there. And what we'll do is we'll bypass our own internal system. We'll even sabotage our own happiness for that. So what's so important to pay attention to is we have to first connect with ourselves. How the world works is really simple. Hashem created this world in a very, very wise way. And that's, we have 7 days of the week, and then we have Shabbos. Shabbos is going to give us, is the place where we're able to receive the bracha. It's not just like some magic potion or like a bag of magic beans that shows up our way. It is a bag of magic beans actually, because the chilling's awesome. But yeah. But if we think about the concept, coming into Shabbos is going to tell you everything you need to know about how well your week went or how well it will go next week. And you're not measuring, again, success. It's about contentment. You're measuring where I am in the place of receptivity. So if you want to know how well you did, you have to ask yourself, am I in a place where I am disconnecting or actively connecting? And if you're in a place where you're able to connect, that is already a signal that you are in a place where your day-to-day is open and receptive, right? So just that's kind of one part of it. So the next thing we're going to move into is if we're trying to figure out where we are in this kind of experience in general, one thing you can really do is ask yourself about reaction. So how do you react? How do you react to certain things? And that reaction, right? That first initial kind of response from you is going to tell you a lot about your process. So if you're trying to get more information on your process, notice how you react in different situations. So what I always say is emotions are the first draft. So knowing that your first reaction is not always your is going to be the longevity of your reaction, but the reaction itself is a big component of, like, if you want to know where you are, that is going to tell you a lot about where you are. So the thing is, in reaction itself, if you think of like a situation, like I had a situation where, again, somebody close to me gave me a heads up about something. They're like, okay, I'm just going to let you know, this is going to be a topic, and I know that you react, right? As in your reactions usually intense. So I'm giving you a heads up so you can kind of digest it. So when the topic is approached, you don't kind of freak out. And first of all, that person coming and communicating that to me, I was very appreciative, because that person was right. I was going to react. The next part of that was, how do I digest that, right? How do I digest that piece of information? And it was really good, because knowing the digestive time I needed, it was helpful. And I needed a couple weeks for that my perception to widen and my perspective to kind of internalize. So when we think of information, right? Information that turns into emotion, it's like food. Some things go down easy. Some things take 30 seconds to digest. For example, if you're eating a smoothie or you're having a couple grapes or whatever, you can pop that in your mouth and go for a run and you're fine. On the other hand, if I give you a steak dinner and then tell you to go for a run, you are not going to be able to. You are going to feel that kind of pain and the indigestion. With after you eat a steak, sometimes you need to rest, sometimes you need to sleep, sometimes you don't need food for the next few hours, right? You're so full that the movement will take some time, or to get energy, right? Because if protein is energy, then it takes time. So first thing, the information or the reaction, it doesn't have to be, this could be applied to something good and positive or negative. So it doesn't have to do necessarily with something negative. It has to do with either positive or negative. Knowing how, okay, so there's the initial reaction, right? So there's the information, reaction, and then there's the digestive time, the digestion time. So that's why I always say emotions are the first draft. Know what that emotion is that you have there first. The next thing is, how much time do you need to digest? So how you react has to do with a lot of things. Number one, it has to do with, has this happened in the past? Has this kind of thing, is this, whatever you're hearing, is it familiar, right? And if in the past it's had a negative, right? If there's been, like, let's say, for example, you get a ticket, right? Somebody gets a ticket, a driving ticket. It depends on, you can if in the past you've reacted negatively, then or if you've had like a horrible experience with a cop, then the next time you even see a cop, you kind of, the anxiety already starts to build. But if you're in a place where it's been handled well, right, and you had money in the bank to pay for it, there's no big deal. You just pay it and you go on. So knowing what's attached to that emotion is really important. So that's number one. So it's always important to remind yourself, like in life, when we're reacting, remind yourself that first reaction is like a first draft. There's a lot that's going to come after that process, right? So just reminding yourself of that. Number two, think of it like a movie screen, right? Or just a screen in general. What's actually going on on the screen itself is not actually what's going on. So if you think about a film set, what you see on screen is actually not what's going on in the entire production, right? The screen is just a tiny piece of what they're trying to tell you. And then if you look around, if you step away from the screen and you look, there's a location, there is an entire staff, there are mics and sound and actors and wardrobe. There are so many things that are going on that it'll take sometimes days to take in all the information. So what's important to notice is that in general, if we find ourselves reacting heavily, and there's an intensity to it, the first thing is that we come from a place where there isn't trust. Trust in ourself, trust in a process, trust in a higher power. Knowing that, like, that in life we have to build more trust. It's an active thing of connecting, right? So it's not a passive of, oh, I'm just going to let this go because I have no control over this. But there is an active component of, no, I'm going to learn to trust. I'm going to teach myself how to trust, right? And then ask yourself the specific questions that you need to build on that trust. Where we find ourselves not being able to trust a lot of times comes from usually past experiences. Now, where happiness comes into this is when we're bypassing our own contentment to go for success, right? A lot of times what happens is that it does compromise our trust. So, like, just even right now, in the media in general, there's like a couple things going on where, like, people communicate being taken advantage of or accusing other people of taking advantage of them, right? A lot of times this kind of stuff happens because we're not listening to ourselves, because we're able to bypass our own happiness for success, because we're trying to find a shortcut, and because we're not being honest with ourselves. So this is something that's really, really, really important to pay attention to. Now, I'm not saying if you have been taken advantage of in the past that it's your fault, right? A lot of times if we're brought up in environments where we haven't been taught this, we are susceptible to that. So it's something to pay attention to. It's really important to pay attention to. The other thing is what I do see is that I'm saying observing from and again, I'll bring it back into our little component, our little talk here. But when we see this stuff going on, like in the media of either, people being taken advantage of or people taking advantage of others, there's usually, it usually comes from a place of isolated incidents of people being isolated. When we're able to build a family unit or a community unit, right? None of them are perfect, but a place where there is trust, honesty and transparency. What happens is you always have somebody having your back. There's always somebody that you're never making decisions alone. And this is something that I learned even in my own experience. Whereas when I've been around people that haven't been as honest or aligned with my values, and again, not bad people, just people with different visions and processes, a lot of times it was a place where I had to make either quick, fast decisions on my own, or I was coming from a place of greed, I was like trying to cheat the system somehow, saying, oh, if I do this, that, and the other, I'm going to get there faster. And it ends up hurting me. Or I'm going to get to happiness, right? And trying to get to that success. And then again, having whatever dangled in front of you, if that is, whatever the shortcut of sorts, sometimes can actually sabotage you in many ways and create a sense of debt. Now, debt isn't only financial, it's emotional debt, it's spiritual debt. So it's really important to, in your life, like, take stock of, like, the ecosystem. Take stock of the ecosystem that you live in and ask yourself, are you happy? Are you content with what you're giving and what you're getting back? Are you happy with the place you're in? Or is there something you're trying to manipulate somehow to get somewhere specific? So ask yourself how much you enjoy what you do. So the next piece is also a piece from Naval, and he talks about success. He says, people say money can't buy you happiness. And he says, actually, money can buy you happiness. And what he means by that is that when you put in many hours into something, whatever you acquire from that many hours of dedication is yours. You've earned it. So, like money, there's a currency that is gained from something that you've dedicated a lot of time and effort into. And it's not necessarily about where you've come to, as in whatever that is, but it's more about the process in itself. Simple thing would be, whatever job you're in or whatever you're doing, right? Even in the home, if you love what you're doing, there's a lot of satisfaction in what you're doing. There's an active component to it. And the repetition of doing it over and over gives you this underestimated satisfaction. And that in itself is something that gets you. It's like the money that buys you the happiness, that you're in a place where you're actually loving what you're doing. And most people, they think, oh, I have to do something I don't love to get to somewhere I love. And that won't buy you happiness. It won't buy you happiness if you are constantly repeating yourself, right? If it's at work, at home, the thoughts in your head, right? If it's negative, if there's something negative connected to it, it's not going to give you something satisfactory. So it's right. So it's not going to buy you the happiness. But the thing that the currency that is going to buy you that happiness is the repetition of connecting with yourself and having that satisfaction through the active component of whatever you're doing in your day-to-day. And that is why healthy habits are so important. Healthy habits are so important because it helps regulate ourselves. It helps us build trust, but it also helps build a compass of how we treat ourselves. And if we treat ourselves right, when somebody from an outside comes in and wants to mistreat us or dangle something in front of us that is not authentic, to try to get us to do something or go somewhere or pay a certain price to something that actually has no worth or value, that constant repetition of doing that internal work is going to manifest in where your compass is. And whenever those things that are not real, which are illusions, are put in front of us, we're able to recognize and see through them to see if they are authentic or not. Coming back to the emotional reaction, the emotional reactions that we have to things is a lot of times when we're having kind of a shocking reaction. It's almost like the concept of a magic trick. And I've talked about this before. I think his name is, there's a guy that writes, he's like a magician that writes a book on success and happiness. And he was saying that, like, when we think, it's like when you're surprised at a certain reaction, it's usually, again, you keep kind of putting the blinders on, right? So when you think of a magician, everyone knows that humans can't do magic. What he's doing is his hands are moving faster than your eyes. So we all know we're being deceived. Standing in front of a magician, you're being deceived somehow. You are paying money for somebody to deceive you. So why are you surprised, right? So it kind of, when we slow down, when we go at our own pace, when we take the time to align the dots, what we'll start to notice is that emotionally it'll be easier to digest things, right? It makes that screen a little wider. We're able to see what's going on behind. So when you find yourself in a place where you are either really, really stressed with information that comes your way, and this is kind of what they do in the news. They do this to us every single day, and it's kind of getting more and more. So these kind of everything's about like, how can I get you to react? How can I get you to take the bait? When we're trying to go by our own process, we have to kind of build trust. So taking that bait is almost eliminating the confidence and the trust in ourselves, right? So that we kind of are more, we are more about the curiosity of where that would take us versus our internal process. And then it comes back to our internal process is boring compared to the reaction. It's boring. And we all know this. It's like saying healthy food. Healthy food is boring, right? It's much nicer to eat something that tastes better and has a lot more flavor in it than something that might be better for us. And again, we're all guilty of it, right? Me too. So coming back to this process is noticing when you notice, if you're trying to see where you are in your experience, notice your reactions. The reactions are really going to tell you a lot about where you are. The next thing is, taking that time to process. So we've talked about this as well. So taking some time to process whatever it is that you need to process. Asking yourself, digestion and discomfort. Notice how much time you need. Notice what your process is. And the next question is, what might change if you trust the process instead of trying to control the outcome? And this is kind of where we'll conclude. For a lot of us in life, we try to control outcomes instead of trust a process. And controlling the outcome in itself, we could find ourselves adding a lot of stress to a process. Will interfere, right? There will be a lot of interference. So that's very important to notice in general. Are you in a place where you try to control the outcomes, and what are the steps you take rather than build trust in yourself and trust in the process? So when we think of the process, think of digestion as a process, right? Now, you won't need to control your digestion if you're eating healthy foods. And that's a simple fact. Like if you're consuming authenticity in general, if your brain is processing healthy thoughts, if your body is consuming healthy things, not manipulated things, not things with additives. And this could be everywhere in your life, right? This could be physically, emotionally, spiritually, right? And it even comes to, I can say this about intimacy as well. Like a lot of times people think, oh, we need all the extras. Like we talk about so many things and we need all the extras. And if you think about all the extras, and people will kind of say things like, oh, you're just uneducated, you're not willing to explore. And this could be in business, again, back to intimacy, it could be into spiritually, all that stuff. The extras get you nowhere, okay? They get you nowhere. They just, it's like going into a gym also. There can be so many things, but at the end of the day, it boils down to the basics. And when we think of functionality, it always has to do with simplicity. There's a simplicity to it. So again, instead of saying, I'm going to take thousands of probiotics and digestive enzymes and all the other things I need to try to digest the food I'm struggling to digest, eat healthier, clean up the stress in your life, and everything will flow. Things will flow naturally. You will not have to intercept life with all the complexities. And it's very easy to buy BS that people say, in the sense of like, oh, all these things in life are necessary. It's unnecessary. There's so much out there that's unnecessary. Come back to the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are simple. The fundamentals are simple. Connect with yourself, have that active component, and bringing this full circle, as in the things that you do in your life should be in a place, should position you to be able to retain, to feel nurtured. And last question I'll ask you is, in love, right? When we think of love, are you in love with the idea of loving somebody else, loving the people in your life, or how does it feel to actually feel loved, right? So if you had a choice to love somebody or for somebody to love you and feel, right? Not them, not the illusion of them loving you, but you actually feeling and retaining that love, how does that feel? And that's really when we talk about our Creator, when we talk about Hashem, and we talk about feeling love in our life, a lot of times that is the part that's lacking, that we're not in a place where we can retain it. We can give it, but we can't retain it. And part of that retention is that we don't have control over what that other person is going to, how they're going to give it to us, right? How we're going to get it. But the thing is you have to ask yourself, are you in a position to retain it? So with that, I will leave you all with that. Thank you so much for joining this practice. And yes, we will open it up.